They said Lagos was a city where secrets never lasted, yet Sarah had kept hers buried for 5 long years. On this humid evening in Surulere, the knock at her door nearly shattered everything. Her body stiffened, breath caught in her throat. She wasn't just hiding clothes or makeup, she was hiding her entire identity. Behind the walls of her apartment lived Samuel, the boy she pretended to be. And tonight someone was dangerously close to finding out. The sound of her neighbor's voice calling her male alias sent waves of panic running through her veins. Sarah's mind raced as she shoved a dress deeper into her suitcase, tucking away the single reminder of the woman she really was. She pressed down on the zipper with trembling hands, praying no detail betrayed her. The knocking grew hard. Her chest tightened as sweat rolled down her temple. Lagos nights were noisy with blaring danfo horns and shouting traitors, but inside her flat, silence became a weapon. One wrong move and the mask would fall. She forced her shoulders back, deepened her voice, and opened the door with a calculated calm. Her neighbor, Michael, stood tall in the doorway, holding a misplaced package. His eyes swept across her small apartment like he was searching for something more than just conversation. Sarah's lips stretched into a polite smile, but her heartbeat thundered like a drum. She felt exposed, every corner of the room threatening to betray her. He lingered too long, watching her with quiet curiosity. Sarah shifted her stance to block his view, her thoughts racing with fear. If Michael noticed even the smallest detail, the truth would explode into the open. Moments like this always reminded her why she chose this path. Life as Sarah had been filled with obstacles, dismissed at job interviews, mocked for her dreams, and cornered by men who saw her as prey. Reinventing herself as Samuel wasn't just an act, it was her shield against a world that offered women little mercy. In Lagos, survival often demanded sacrifice. Samuel had doors open that Sarah never could. Respect came easier, and opportunities flowed, but every day was a gamble. Tonight proved that the disguise could crumble at any moment. At work in Victoria Island, she avoided gatherings where secrets could slip. On buses, she leaned into shadows, pulling hoodies tight to mask her frame. In every reflection, she searched for cracks in the illusion. Samuel had become her armor, but Sarah still lived beneath the surface, lonely and suffocating. Pretending to be someone else meant cutting pieces of herself away each day. Yet she endured, because the alternative meant going back to a life where dreams were dismissed and her dignity was at constant risk. She had sworn never to return to that prison. When Michael finally turned to leave, Sarah exhaled shakily, shutting the door as quickly as she dared. Her knees nearly buckled, but she steadied herself against the wall. She whispered her real name softly, like a prayer she feared the city might overhear. Her disguise had held tonight, but she knew the danger was growing. Lagos was too restless to keep secrets forever. What she didn't realize was that her greatest threat wasn't exposure by neighbors or coworkers. Her downfall was coming from a different direction. Love was about to enter her life, and love had a way of stripping disguises bare. But little did she know, the morning after would demand the same careful act. Sarah rose before dawn, binding her chest tightly and pulling on the loose shirt that completed Samuel's image. In the cracked mirror, she rehearsed the firm nod and confident walk that Lagos respected in men. She slipped on her sneakers, adjusted her cap, and stepped into the noisy streets. The city was already alive, hawkers calling out, buses screeching to sudden halts, and people pushing past one another. To survive another day, she had to bury Sarah deeper and let Samuel take control. At the office on Victoria Island, Samuel was known as quiet, hardworking, and reliable. Sarah kept her head down, burying herself in files and reports, never giving colleagues reason to pry. But behind the composed mask, she lived in constant fear of slip-ups. Every lunch break was calculated, avoiding the restroom when others went, eating alone when possible, and speaking little to keep her voice controlled. It was exhausting, but she endured because the stakes were too high. One careless moment could unravel everything, exposing not just her secret, but her entire reason for living in Lagos. Yet amid the rigid routine, something unexpected stirred. A new colleague had joined the department, Michael, the same neighbor who had knocked on her door. Their offices were just 3 cubicles apart, and Sarah felt the tension she could not ignore. His presence unsettled her, not because of suspicion, but because he carried an energy that disrupted her carefully controlled world. He greeted her warmly, sometimes too warmly, and his eyes carried a kindness that threatened to pierce the walls she had built. Sarah tried to stay distant, but her heart betrayed her. The city did not slow down for emotions. Deadlines piled up, traffic swallowed hours, and survival demanded attention. Still, she caught herself watching Michael during meetings, his confidence filling the room effortlessly. He treated everyone with ease, yet he seemed to notice Samuel more than the others. Sarah would laugh quietly at his jokes, then quickly mask it, afraid of appearing too soft. She was supposed to be Samuel, detached and reserved. But inside, the woman she had buried stirred restlessly, longing for connection, longing for something she had denied herself for years. Her evenings in Surulere became heavier with thoughts. After shedding Samuel's outer shell in the safety of her room, she would sit by the window, staring at the restless Lagos traffic below. She thought about the danger of longing for someone who only knew half of her. She wondered if Michael's smile was harmless, or if it carried a weight she couldn't afford. Love, she told herself, was not an option. Love demanded honesty, and honesty could destroy everything she had fought to build. But no matter how many times she repeated it, her heart refused to listen. Still, survival came first. She doubled her caution, becoming sharper at work and colder at home. Yet she knew the storm was approaching. Emotions were dangerous in a city where secrets struggled to breathe. The same way Lagos traffic always exposed the impatient, love had a way of exposing lies. As Sarah laid on her bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan creaking above, she realized she was no longer just hiding from suspicion. She was hiding from her own heart, and hearts were far harder to control than neighbors or coworkers. But little did she know, the walls she had built around her heart were already cracking. The following week at the office, Michael became more than just a neighbor or colleague. He became a presence she could not ignore. He had a way of lighting up conversations, pulling others in with his charm. Sarah, as Samuel, tried to remain on the sidelines, but Michael always seemed to find reasons to involve her. The more attention he gave, the more dangerous her position became. It wasn't discovery she feared in that moment, it was her own restless emotions. Days turned into weeks, and routine no longer shielded her. She found herself anticipating his greetings, noticing his laughter echo across the open office space. In moments she was meant to be focused on spreadsheets, her eyes would wander unconsciously toward him. Lagos was a city of distractions, but this was no ordinary distraction. This was a crack in the very disguise that kept her alive. She reminded herself that Samuel had no space for love. Samuel was meant to be calculated, detached, untouchable. But the truth was, Sarah had been starved of affection for too long. At lunch breaks, she avoided eating with others, but Michael would sometimes stop by her desk, drawing casual smiles and light conversations that made her chest ache. She responded as Samuel, short, reserved, but inside she wrestled with feelings she could not suppress. It was a dangerous kind of hunger, one she couldn't feed. Lagos life was already complicated with rent, deadlines, and traffic battles. Adding forbidden emotions to her disguise was like playing with fire in a room already filled with smoke. Sooner or later, something would ignite, and the result would be uncontrollable. In the evenings, her small Surreal apartment became her confession ground. She sat on the edge of her bed, peeling off the bindings that transformed her each morning, staring into the mirror at the woman she had silenced. She whispered questions into the empty air. Could she risk trusting someone? Could she let love in without losing herself? The silence gave no answers, only a reflection of a weary woman caught between two worlds. Samuel earned respect in the city, but Sarah carried the longing. Each night, the gap between those identities grew wider. Her family back in Port Harcourt believed she was a hard-working young man making something of himself in Lagos. They praised Samuel's progress, unaware of the daughter they had lost to survival. Sometimes, she wondered if she had disappeared completely, if the Sarah they raised had died the moment she put on Samuel's clothes. But then she would remember Michael's kind eyes, his warmth, and she felt alive again, dangerously alive. That spark terrified her because it meant Sarah was still here, waiting to be seen, even though being seen could destroy her entire life. Yet fate has a cruel sense of timing. One evening, after another long Lagos workday, the rain poured down heavily, flooding streets and trapping workers in the office. Michael offered to share his ride home, insisting on company through the storm. Sarah hesitated, heart pounding, but refusing seemed suspicious. Sitting beside him in that car, the city lights reflecting against the rain-streaked windows, she realized her secret was on the edge of exposure, not through suspicion, but through connection. She felt something shifting, and she knew love had officially entered the battlefield against her disguise. But little did she know, the storm was only a warning of the chaos to come. The night after the heavy rain, Lagos carried a strange calm, but inside Sarah's chest, unease swirled like traffic at Ojulegba. Sharing that car ride with Michael had shaken her. His laughter still echoed in her mind, his kindness gnawed at the walls of her disguise. She had felt warmth, yet also fear, because closeness was dangerous. She had built her life on distance. Now, with Michael unknowingly breaching it, Sarah felt like a tightrope walker swaying above an endless fall. At work, pressure mounted. The company prepared for a major presentation to investors, and Samuel was pulled into late-night tasks with Michael's team. Hours stretched into exhaustion, and the disguise became harder to maintain. Fatigue blurred her discipline, her voice softened when tired, her movements less rigid. Michael noticed small things, tilting his head as if studying Samuel more closely. Sarah caught herself adjusting too quickly, straightening her walk, lowering her tone. Every slip felt like standing at the edge of discovery. The office lights flickered late into the night, and with each hour, her secret became heavier. One evening, the near discovery came crashing close. The air conditioner broke down, leaving the office sweltering under Lagos heat. Colleagues loosened shirts and jackets, joking about the heat wave. Michael, half teasing, urged Samuel to do the same. Panic surged through Sarah's chest. Beneath the layers she wore was a truth she couldn't afford anyone to see. She forced a laugh, brushing off the suggestion, pretending to be buried in work. But Michael lingered with a puzzled expression, watching her too carefully. For a brief second, she felt exposed, the binding pressing painfully against her ribs, threatening to betray her. That night at home, she sat on her bed with trembling hands, replaying the moment. Lagos had always demanded toughness, but this was beyond survival. It was living on the edge of collapse. She thought of her father's debts, the shame, the harassment she had escaped by becoming Samuel. That disguise had saved her, but it had also chained her. The woman in the mirror looked back at her with tired eyes, pleading for release. Sarah pressed her palms to her face, torn between gratitude for Samuel's protection and grief for her stolen identity. Yet love complicated everything further. Michael had grown too close, not in suspicion, but in affection. He sought Samuel's company more often, cracking jokes during stressful hours, suggesting hangouts after work. Sarah always declined, terrified of exposure, yet secretly longing to say yes. In a city as loud and crowded as Lagos, finding genuine connection was rare, and she felt it in his presence. But every smile from him was a double-edged sword. It made Sarah come alive, but it threatened to kill Samuel. She feared both outcomes equally, caught in an impossible trap. The following week, the company announced a team bonding retreat in Lekki, an overnight trip designed to build trust among staff. For Sarah, the news landed like a ticking bomb. Shared rooms, casual moments, lowered guards, such settings were breeding grounds for exposure. She masked her panic with a nod, but inside, her heart thundered with dread. How long could she keep Samuel alive under such pressure? She stared at the company email long after others had moved on, her mind spinning with escape plans. For the first time, she realized discovery wasn't a question of if, it was when. But little did she know, the retreat in Lekki would pull her closer to danger than ever before. The company bus rolled out of Victoria Island with laughter and chatter filling the air. Sarah, disguised as Samuel, sat by the window, forcing a calm she did not feel. The journey stretched across the third mainland bridge, Lagos waters glistening under the morning sun. Around her, colleagues loosened up, cracking jokes and snapping selfies. It was meant to be fun, but for Sarah, it was a battlefield where the mask could easily slip. She gripped her backpack tightly, already restless. The resort in Lekki was beautiful, palm trees swaying, waves crashing not far away, and chalets lined neatly along sandy paths. But Sarah saw no beauty, only threats. Colleagues cheered as they rushed into their shared rooms, while she hesitated, dreading the moment she would have to share space. By chance, or perhaps by fate, she was paired with Michael. Her heart dropped, but she couldn't protest without drawing suspicion. Stepping into the room, she scanned every corner, calculating where she would hide, how she would change, and what excuses she could invent to protect her fragile disguise. The first test came quickly. After dinner, colleagues decided on late-night games by the pool. Michael urged Samuel to join, and refusing would seem odd. She sat among them, tense, forcing laughs when needed. During a game of truth or dare, someone teased Michael about his closeness with Samuel. Sarah froze as laughter erupted, Michael only smiling in response. Heat flushed her body, not from exposure, but from the dangerous line they were walking. Every word, every glance, drew her closer to a truth she wasn't ready to reveal. The night ended with her heart heavier than when it began. Back in the chalet, Sarah tried to relax, waiting for Michael to fall asleep. But Michael, curious as ever, asked casual questions about Samuel's life, pressing for details. She answered cautiously, weaving fragments of her cover story, terrified of slipping. Hours passed before he finally drifted into sleep, his breathing steady. Sarah sat on her bed, exhausted but unable to rest, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly. The room felt too small, too dangerous. She moved silently to the bathroom, unbinding her chest for relief, whispering a prayer that he would not wake unexpectedly. The next morning, the retreat activities pushed her further into risk. Sports on the beach demanded energy, and colleagues joked about Samuel's refusal to swim. She stayed at the edges, claiming fatigue, while Michael teased gently but watched with concern. She could feel his eyes studying her, piecing together puzzles she prayed would remain unsolved. When his hand brushed hers during a game of volleyball, her chest tightened, not from fear of discovery, but from the dangerous comfort of his touch. For the first time, she wasn't sure which was more terrifying, being caught or falling in love. That evening, the retreat ended with a bonfire by the beach. Flames roared against the backdrop of crashing waves, colleagues singing and cheering into the night. Sarah sat quietly, the firelight dancing across her face, thoughts spiraling. For years, Samuel had been her shield, her way of surviving Lagos. But here, under the stars, surrounded by laughter and Michael's quiet gaze, she felt Sarah rising to the surface. It terrified her. If Samuel was unmasked, everything she had built could collapse. Yet a part of her longed for it to happen, just to finally breathe again. But little did she know, the retreat would not end without scars. On the final morning in Lekki, the team gathered for a group jog along the beach. The salty breeze brushed against their faces as waves slapped the shore. Sarah, disguised as Samuel, kept to the back, praying the activity would end quickly. But Lagos colleagues thrived on energy and competition, urging everyone to run faster, push harder. She struggled, her bindings pressing painfully against her ribs. Each step reminded her that Samuel was only a costume, and costumes were never meant for marathons under the scorching sun. Halfway through the jog, disaster struck. Sarah tripped on the uneven sand, falling hard to the ground. Pain shot through her ankle as colleagues rushed to her side. Michael was the first to kneel, his hand steady on her shoulder. Concern filled his eyes, too close, too intense. As he helped her sit up, Sarah realized with dread that her loose shirt had shifted, revealing the faintest outline her bindings usually concealed. Panic surged, and with trembling hands she tugged at her clothes, praying no one else had noticed. Michael's gaze lingered a second too long, unsettling her completely. They carried her back to the chalet, insisting she rest. The pain in her ankle was bearable compared to the storm raging inside her. Lying on the bed, she replayed the moment endlessly, Michael's steady hand, his eyes searching hers, and that terrifying second when her disguise had nearly failed. She felt trapped in a shrinking cage. The Samuel she built so carefully was cracking, and Sarah knew it. Still, she forced a smile, muttering excuses about fatigue and discomfort, hoping the suspicion would fade. But Michael's silence told her he had questions she could not answer. The retreat ended later that afternoon, but the bus ride back to Victoria Island felt longer than ever. Colleagues laughed, shared stories, and played loud music, yet Sarah sat in silence, staring out the window. Lagos waters stretched wide beneath the bridge, but her thoughts were narrower than ever. How long could she keep this up? She was tired of hiding, but she feared the consequences of truth even more. Every honk of traffic outside sounded like a ticking clock, each moment pulling her closer to inevitable exposure. She clenched her fists, holding back tears no one could see. That night in Surulere, the city hummed as usual, but Sarah's apartment felt colder. She sat by the window, staring at the restless traffic, the blinking headlights, the shouts of street vendors. Her body ached from the fall, but her spirit ached more. The retreat had shown her a glimpse of freedom and danger in equal measure. Michael's presence haunted her, the way he looked at her when she fell, the way he stayed close, the way he seemed to sense something beneath Samuel's mask. She feared his curiosity, yet she longed for his understanding. It was tearing her apart. Sarah told herself she could rebuild the walls, double her caution, silence her heart. But deep inside she knew it was too late. The retreat had planted seeds of suspicion and desire that no disguise could erase. The city could ignore 1,000 secrets, but love was never one of them. And Michael was no longer just a colleague or neighbor, he was the threat and the promise she could not escape. With her head pressed against the windowpane, Sarah realized her story was moving too fast, like Lagos traffic at rush hour, and there was no turning back. But little did she know, the office party would be the stage where the first threads of her disguise began to unravel. The event was held in a glitzy hall in Victoria Island, decorated with balloons, lights, and the hum of city luxury. Colleagues arrived in sharp suits and elegant gowns, laughter bouncing off the walls. Sarah, disguised as Samuel, adjusted her blazer nervously, her chest tightening at the thought of spending hours in a room designed for mingling. Unlike the office, there were no cubicles to hide behind. Tonight Samuel would have to be seen. And being seen was dangerous. The music thumped, glasses clinked, and colleagues loosened up with drinks and playful banter. Sarah stood at the edge of the crowd, pretending to enjoy the rhythm, but her eyes scanned constantly for threats. Legos parties were not forgiving. People hugged too tightly, laughed too freely, noticed too much. When Michael spotted her and waved, her heart lurched. He made his way through the crowd with ease, his confidence glowing under the lights. She forced a smile as he joined her, his presence both comforting and terrifying. Being close to him in such a lively atmosphere made her disguise feel thin as paper. As the night progressed, games and performances filled the program. A karaoke segment sent waves of laughter across the room, colleagues urging Samuel to sing. Sarah's throat went dry. Her voice was always a careful balance, low enough to pass, never raised too high. Refusing would draw suspicion, but accepting could expose her. With a shaky breath, she took the microphone, singing softly, cautiously. The crowd cheered regardless, but Michael's eyes never left her. She saw something in his gaze, not mockery, not doubt, but searching, as if he heard more than the voice she was trying to disguise. Later, a toast was raised, and colleagues clinked glasses, pulling each other into embraces. Sarah stiffened when one of the women leaned in for a hug, her body reacting instinctively to protect her disguise. The awkwardness lasted only a second, but it was enough. Michael caught the hesitation, his brows furrowing slightly. He said nothing, but his eyes followed her longer than anyone else's. Sarah sipped her drink quickly, heart pounding, praying the moment had passed unnoticed by others. But she knew Michael's suspicion was growing. His silence was no longer just curiosity. It was quiet observation, and it shook her. By midnight, the hall buzzed with wild laughter and unguarded moments. Sarah slipped outside for air, standing on the balcony overlooking the Lagos skyline. The city lights glittered like restless stars, but peace refused to come. She thought about how long she had carried this lie, how much weight rested on Samuel's shoulders. For a moment, she let herself imagine telling the truth, Michael's understanding gaze, the possibility of freedom. But then reality struck. Truth would mean collapse, the job, the respect, the safety. She gripped the balcony rail tightly, caught between the prison of her secret and the risk of escape. When the party ended and colleagues began dispersing, Michael offered her a ride home. She hesitated, but refusing seemed impossible. In the car, the silence between them was heavier than words. Sarah avoided his gaze, staring out at the neon-lit streets, the endless traffic still crawling even at night. She knew the bond between them had deepened, but so had the danger. For the first time, she sensed Michael wasn't just curious, he was close to the truth. And if he uncovered it, the fallout would not be private. Lagos was a city where secrets rarely stayed buried. They say Lagos is a city of noise, but the silence of family questions cuts deeper than any traffic horn. For weeks, Sarah had managed to live as Samuel without her relatives pressing too hard. But when an unexpected family gathering was announced, an aunt's birthday in Surler, she felt her carefully built disguise tremble. Family didn't just look at you, they studied you. They remembered who you were before. And that was the one thing Sarah could not allow. She arrived early, dressed sharply in Samuel's usual style, pressed shirt, neat trousers, polished shoes. But stepping into her aunt's compound, with the smell of jollof rice in the air and children running barefoot across the tiles, she felt like a stranger in her own skin. Relatives called out, "Samuel! Samuel!" with smiles, but their hugs lingered too long, their eyes scanning her as though something was off. Sarah forced laughter, answering questions with the steady voice she had practiced, but every second felt like walking on thin glass. At the dining table, the weight of their stares grew heavier. An uncle joked about how Samuel had grown quieter these days, less lively than before. An older cousin squinted at her face, saying she looked different, slimmer even. Sarah's heart drummed painfully. She muttered excuses about stress from work, about long nights and tight deadlines, but she could see the doubt settling in their eyes. Just when she thought she could escape unnoticed, Michael walked in. She hadn't expected him there. Turns out, her aunt had invited him. After all, wasn't he Samuel's closest colleague? Sarah froze as he greeted everyone warmly, slipping easily into the family circle. If work had raised his suspicion, this family setting would only sharpen it. And the way his eyes found hers, steady and unreadable, made her chest tighten. Throughout the evening, Michael watched quietly as Sarah navigated conversation. He saw the way she avoided hugs, the way she carefully lowered her voice, the hesitation when asked to lead a short prayer before the meal. And Sarah, though careful, could feel the ground beneath her crumbling. Michael wasn't looking at her like a friend anymore. He was looking at her like someone holding a puzzle piece that almost fit. The night dragged on with music and chatter, but Sarah's mind was far away. She felt cornered, caught between blood ties that remembered too much and Michael's sharp gaze that saw too deeply. Every laugh she forced, every word she spoke, was another thread pulled loose from her disguise. By the time she left, her aunt called after her, saying softly, "Samuel, are you sure you're all right? You don't seem yourself these days." Sarah forced a smile, waving as she slipped into the night. But inside, panic clawed at her. Because she knew. The mask of Samuel wasn't just cracking anymore, it was beginning to shatter. But little did Sarah know, the walls she built so carefully were already closing in. Lagos had been her stage, and Samuel her mask, but the performance was almost over. After the family gathering, Michael could no longer ignore what his heart kept whispering. He had watched her too closely, seen details others missed, and felt truths no disguise could bury. And so, on a humid evening, with the sky darkening over the city, he decided to confront the mystery head-on. Sarah had just left the office, exhausted from a long day, when she felt the weight of footsteps trailing her. The streets of Victoria Island buzzed with hawkers and taxis, yet something in the air felt personal, inescapable. She turned a corner, hoping to lose the feeling, but then she saw him. Michael. Standing firm, his eyes burning with questions, his presence demanding answers. Her breath caught, her chest tightened, and suddenly, the disguise she carried like armor felt too heavy to wear. Michael said nothing at first. His silence was louder than the traffic horns and louder than her heartbeat. He simply looked at her, eyes sharp, searching, unrelenting. Sarah shifted, clutching her bag, fighting the urge to flee. Every instinct screamed at her to hold the mask tighter, to keep Samuel alive. But Michael's gaze had already pierced through Samuel's voice, Samuel's clothes, Samuel's act. She felt stripped, vulnerable, fragile beneath the weight of a truth begging to escape. She tried to walk past him, but Michael moved closer, closing the space between them. His eyes flickered with something she couldn't name. Was it betrayal, pity, or an ache too deep to hide? In that moment, Sarah realized this was no longer about survival alone. It was about him too. For weeks she had pushed down the growing tension between them, the warmth of his kindness, the way his presence softened her lonely nights. But now, standing before him, she feared losing more than just her secret. Her voice quivered as she muttered excuses, flimsy words meant to deflect, but Michael didn't budge. Instead, he whispered her real name. Not Samuel. Sarah. And the sound of it, on his lips, cut through every wall she had built. The city seemed to fall silent around them. Her knees weakened, her chest tightened, and for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as Samuel. Not as the mask. But as herself. It terrified her. It broke her. Tears burned her eyes as she turned away, unable to face him. The streets blurred, her disguise collapsing faster than she could hold it together. Michael didn't push further, but his voice followed her as she fled into the night. A voice not angry, but wounded. A voice that carried both confusion and care. And Sarah knew then, running beneath the streetlights of Lagos, that the truth was no longer a secret she could bury. The next step would change everything. But little did Sarah know, secrets don't just end with a whisper, they echo. By the next morning, the story of Samuel's strange disappearance from the office had begun to spread. Colleagues asked questions, whispers floated down the halls, and Michael's silence only deepened the mystery. Sarah stayed locked in her apartment, staring at the mirror. For the first time in years, she let the mask fall completely. The wig off, the clothes folded, her reflection revealed nothing but a young woman who had fought too hard, lied too long, and finally stood on the edge of truth. When Michael knocked on her door, her chest tightened. She had considered never opening it, considered vanishing from Lagos and starting all over again. But running had taken too much already. With trembling hands, she opened the door. Michael stood there, not in anger, but in quiet pain. The weight of her lie hung between them. His eyes searched hers, and though words did not pass his lips immediately, Sarah could see the storm inside him. For a moment, she wished he had shouted. Silence was worse. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice low, steady, carrying years of buried truth. She explained the fear that had driven her, the dangers of being vulnerable in a city that preyed on the weak, the desperation to be taken seriously in a world that valued Samuel more than Sarah. She spoke of survival, of ambition, and of loneliness. Her words spilled like water breaking a dam, unstoppable, raw, unpolished. And as she spoke, Michael's expression shifted from anger to something more complex, something that looked painfully close to understanding. But understanding was not the same as forgiveness. Michael stepped back, torn between what his heart felt and what his mind screamed. He cared for her, that much was undeniable. Yet the betrayal cut deep. She had lived a lie beside him, shared moments, shared dreams, all behind a mask. His chest rose and fell sharply, his silence filled with conflict. Sarah stood frozen, realizing love could not erase the sting of deceit. For the first time, she feared that her truth had cost her the one person who saw her beyond the disguise. As he turned to leave, Sarah's knees weakened, and tears streamed freely. But then he stopped at the door. Without looking back, Michael's voice broke the silence. He said he needed time, but he would not walk away completely. The truth was out now, and though it had shattered the illusion, it had also revealed something real, something neither of them could deny. It wasn't love yet, not fully, but it was the possibility of it. And for Sarah, that sliver of hope was enough to breathe again. That night, Lagos pulsed outside with its endless rhythm of life, honking cars, blaring music, restless laughter, but inside Sarah's apartment, silence reigned. She sat by the window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. For years, she had fought to keep a mask alive. Now, for the first time, she wondered what it would mean to live freely as herself. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with judgment, whispers, and pain. But also, maybe, with love. And in that fragile balance, her story had only just begun. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, comment, subscribe, and share for more interesting stories like this one.